Alright, let's talk a little bit of Bittersweet Candy Bowl. I'm going to actually, more than likely going to end up splitting this into two videos, because when I get started on this story, it's really hard to not get completely caught up in it. Veronica Vera has been writing this story since she was very, very young, and you can actually tell in the early work. I don't think I had you read anything in the really early stuff, but I have two of the hardback editions, and the early material is very much what you would see from a young, burgeoning artist who's still trying to find her own. This is absolutely not anything negative on her part, because as you can tell, as we go through, you see so much improvement in the style, in the organization of the pages. Characters become much more dynamic. Characters grow. The humor even sharpens up a little bit. And it's because we get to kind of see her writing process evolve over the years, which is really, really cool. And we finally come to the stuff I had you reading, and this is Volume 2. This is where she really started to come into her own. She starts working with dynamic panels, full-page illustrations. The webcomic itself is very well done, but when you actually get your hands on some of the hardbound books, she really makes it work as a physical edition. She made the jump from web to hardbound to hard copy amazingly well. And all of this stuff, it's not like you're going through a publisher. When you buy this is something that they manage themselves. They have all sorts of fundraisers. They have a lot of merchandise you can buy directly from the website, and that's actually kind of cool. The publishing industry in this country has been pretty cutthroat for a long time. They really controlled culture. You had a very, very specific market for books, for stories, for literature in the modern era, and it was, nigh on near impossible for a writer to take it upon themselves to market their material effectively. Well, she's done it. She's done a really, really good job of it. Building a fan base, having successful Kickstarters. I actually contributed to a Kickstarter, which was a really, really nifty experience. And it's really amazing to actually be studying someone in a literary context who is alive. Who is alive and active as a writer and as a creator. So just beyond the simple substance of the story itself, this might actually turn into a 3-part video. We have Vera as a writer herself, the personality that she brings to the webpage and to the books. She's very involved. She's almost, this is going to sound weird. If she ever sees this video, it might come off as just incredibly bizarre. She's almost a character that evolves along with the characters in the comic, especially the way that she gives commentary underneath the panels. I don't know if you looked, but underneath the comic, on each page on the webpage, she actually will typically have some type of insight to give as to what's going on in that moment, or she'll just make point some things out. And she also runs a diary blog, which has some very, very interesting points in its own right. And I've tried to come up with ways to incorporate the diary blog into the class, but that would just be too much, and we got a lot of material to cover. But she also runs a Tumblr blog, which is an Ask BCB, and you can actually ask the characters themselves questions, which is, also, you don't see that very often, that a creator is willing to put the characters out so that they can, give insight into their intentions. That's actually really interesting from a literary standpoint, because one of the things we're going to run into over and over again in this class is author intention. When characters do the very insane things that they do sometimes, we ask ourselves, why did they do that? What is their reasoning? And a lot of the debate and a lot of the interest of literature comes from the fact that most of those questions just simply can't be answered except through, oftentimes very tense debate. With Vera, there's a possibility for characters to actually speak to you and to let their perspectives known, which is pretty bizarre, but also really interesting. Now, let me see, how much time have I got? No, don't do that. It's like going to do something weird. No. Okay. So let's just talk for a few seconds about the story itself. Everybody who's reading this likely It's nothing that you've never seen before in terms of the drama. There's all sorts of television programs that cover similar material. I remember my sister really loving Beverly Hills 90210, Freaks and Geeks. These are all shows that follow high school kids through the very strange and odd trepidations of high school and the cliques and the social pitfalls that you find yourself falling into. Where does Bittersweet Candy Bowl differ? Well, it gets its nuance by the fact that it does have such a whimsical style. We have anthropomorphic cats that give it kind of a look of innocence when we have some very, non-innocent topics coming into the foray. I'm sure you've noticed that. But where it really, really stands out, and where it starts to function more as literature as opposed to like trash television, which that's kind of an unfortunate way of putting it, but I don't know if I would call Beverly Hills 90210 or The Hills or The OC. I don't know if I would call any of that literature. You can argue me on it. But where Bittersweet Candy Bowl excels is in its very odd literary form. And the way that I first broke into this was through literary existentialism. This is going to be the first really, really pointed application of literary theory in the course. Now, as I'm doing this, keep in mind, this is nothing that's verified over like scholarly discussion. Pretty much all of this has been formulated at my own independent theory about Bittersweet Candy Bowl, the comic. So if you want to take issue with my interpretation of what's going on here, that's great fuel for writing. I mean, fantastic fuel for writing. So the thing is we have a central character. I would definitely say that between Mike and Lucy, I feel like Lucy in the beginning of the comic gets more of the center. There's more of, she's more the focus of the story. That'll get really, really complicated later. But even to the point that in the very first volume, when we open it up, we actually have a picture of Lucy walking away. I mean, this is a character that, is very much the focal point, the anchor of the narrative. And Lucy, as a character, is frustrating but fascinating. And I'm just going to begin with this. Lucy's character is built off of the Japanese anime concept of the tsundere. The tsundere is a character, typically female, that has romantic feelings for another character, but cannot show them. And so the tsundere ends up projecting a very hard, aggressive, and just kind of mean front. Often appearing very, almost abusive to the object of their affections. And the construct of this, from a gender perspective, is fascinating too, because it almost builds up female characters as inherently unstable, as incapable of dealing with their feelings in a positive and mature way. They deny their feelings, they deny the truth, they take out their emotions in destructive ways. There's a lot of examples of the tsundere in anime. I'm trying to think of a specific ones. I'm not as big a fan of anime as I used to be, but I think the big one that I can come up with right now would be Asuka Soryu Langley from Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you ever see that anime, she is absolute tsundere, and it's done to a very, very a good effect. Typically in anime, the tsundere has like this weird kind of epiphany point where they do come to terms with how they feel, and there's almost like a taming of the shrew narrative. Taming of the shrew is the idea of the hard-edged, aggressive, overtly mean female finally warming up to the object of her affection and kind of being tamed. Again, from a gender perspective, this is extremely problematic. What Veronica Vera has done in Bittersweet Candy Bowl, the thing that really saved it, is she treats Lucy in a very realistic and, in my opinion, very fair way. She's not a two-dimensional tsundere. And her transition, if there will be a transition, her narrative, her story is still, excuse me, very much unresolved. If her story, her story has not resolved in the typical way, and her behavior has functioned in a very real-world context. One of the things that I left out of this reading was the very early material. If you go back and look at Lucy's behavior, it starts with that very almost cutesy, comedic anime tsundere stereotype where she's very mean, very aggressive, to the point of being like cartoonishly violent, which is normal for the tsundere. But as the story progresses, her violence becomes less and less tolerable. Her aggression becomes less and less tolerable. And she begins to cross the line to abuse. And she becomes a straight up, at least in my opinion, a straight up abusive character. You guys didn't get to see most of that because I wanted you to go straight into the conflict where she's finally honest with Mike. But it's important to understand that Lucy was emotionally manipulative and was physically abusive with Mike on multiple occasions. His anger is kind of justified, but as we move into the story, we really start to kind of debate how justified his behavior actually was. So that's the foundation of this story. We're going to leave it here for now to understand Lucy as a character who has come up to this point where she's being honest with Mike, and that's where we get into the material for the existentialism. Next time, we'll really deconstruct Lucy, Mike, and Sandy's relationship, and we'll start to try to make some decisions. Who is being authentic? Who is experiencing despair? Who is in bad faith, and who has escaped bad faith? Think about it, and yay.